So in the last section, we got to this point here. I thought it would be a good stopping point for our low poly base model, and a good time to move on to detailing or starting to create the high poly details for our model. Of course, we do have some larger sections like the wheels, tires, windows, mirrors, this back little bumper diffuser thing. But I thought we could start with the high poly details. Anyways, before we jump into modeling, I just wanted to mention that this is going to be a high poly model, which I know some of you are creating your models or want to create models for use in game engines for mods or whatnot. And high poly models are not optimized for use in game engines because they run slower because of the high amount of detail within them. But there are ways that we can extract the details from our high poly model and apply them to our low poly model. So we get the efficiency of the low poly model, but the detail of the high poly. But that's a completely another tutorial for another time. We're just going to be focusing on the modeling aspect here. So this is where things start to get kind of interesting, and we're going to be learning a couple different tools. And in this particular section, I wanted to focus on the Grille and Headlights area. I do have a reference picture open here to get a closer look at what we're going for, because you can't really tell based off our blueprint anymore. But before we jump into modeling, before anything, I like to create a backup of this low poly that we have so far. And actually, before we start doing stuff in Blender, let me first of all turn on screencast keys. Then also just set my theme to default so it's the same colors as yours. So to create a backup of this, I'm just going to select our object in object mode and click Shift D to duplicate, and then just right click to not move it around. So then when we select one, you can see there's two of them, and I'm just going to move one of these to a separate layer, and we can do that using M. I'm going to move it to this first one on this second grouping, and we're able to change layers here. So I'm just going to stick with our model on the first layer, and this is the one we'll be modeling. Now if you recall, we added the mirror modifier at the beginning of the tutorial. To start adding a lot of detail, a great modifier to use is the Subsurface Modifier, or Subdivision Surface. So we just go to the Modifiers tab, the one with the wrench, Add Modifier, and select Subsurface. Now depending on how powerful your computer is, this may start to get kind of slow, because if we get rid of it for a sec, we can see we have just under 1,000 vertices. But if we add it, we have 3,500. Now if we crank the subdivisions up to 2, we have almost 14,000. So this really starts to add a lot of geometry. That makes it starts to smooth out some surfaces. As you can see here at the top, the vents that were square are now circle-y. And I'm actually just going to add a couple loop cuts across here just to even the density out a little bit. And we could also start turning on smooth shading from our toolbar, and now this starts to give us a really good look of how our car is coming along so far. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll start modeling the grille. So I'm going to keep this reference picture open. And this is the detailing process is where things can start to get kind of creative, and we're going to be using some array modifiers to create this this grill. So I'm actually going to hide the entire model, just clicking H. And I'm going to click Shift C to center our cursor. And then we're going to model a single little piece of the grill. So I'm going to add a cube, tab into edit mode, and I'm actually just going to delete those 4 vertices just so we have a plane. Could have just added a plane if I wanted to. Scale it down a bunch because these pieces are small. And we want to make it tileable. So kind of what it does is, I'm just trying to work this out in my head before I explain it, because I'm not 100% sure how it works. I think that might be it. Alright, so I think I'm going to model that little piece. So it's just something like this. You'll see what this is in a second. Probably doesn't make much sense right now. So I have this one little tiny piece. And I'm going to go to our modifiers tab. This was a separate object, by the way. And then I'm going to click array. And this duplicates it. And basically I just want to crank this up a bunch. Maybe like 20. Maybe even more than that, 30. We'll start centering it along here. Maybe move it up a bit. Probably scale it down even further. Something like that, maybe. And bring this up to, let's bring it up to 50. 40. 39. 39 is probably good. And then I'm going to minimize that and add another one. But I want this one to go beneath it. So I'm going to change this relative offset value to 0 and -1 at the bottom. This isn't actually quite what I wanted. I need to add one of these at the bottom as well. And yeah, we get something like that. And now we can crank that up. And now we get a little grill pattern. Looks pretty good. Yeah, but it just doesn't, if we unhide our car, let's go ahead and bring it into place. What we now want to do is sort of, since this entire grill is just this one tiny piece, we don't have much control over the general shape of it. For example, what I mean by that is we sort of want it to curve along the same edge as this front. So a pretty neat way in order to be able to edit this without deleting our array modifiers is the use of a lattice. So I'm going to go ahead and Shift A, add a lattice. And this isn't a mesh of anything, so it doesn't show up in your renders. But I'm just going to sort of move it and scale it to the rough shape of the grill. This little grill piece. Maybe something like that. and we want to give it some more subdivisions. So if we go to this up here, we now have this new Lattice tab right next to our Modifiers tab. I'm just going to click that, and we have these two values. So we want to crank up this first one to maybe 5. We can keep this at, crank that down to 1, and that can stay at 2. And now what we do is go back to our Grille modifiers, add another modifier, and find the lattice one under deform. And then we're just going to, right now it says red, it's in red, so we're just not working. And then we're just going to select our lattice. And then if we select our lattice in object mode and tab into edit mode, we can select the vertices of the lattice and move it around. And when we move the lattice around, it starts to deform our array modifier mesh. So we can just move these in order to sort of curve our object. And maybe we could probably come back a bit. Something like that. Probably what I'll do is actually extrude our car thing, our car grill bumper area back a little bit further. And then I'm just going to hide our lattice. Actually, just kidding, doesn't line up as nice as it could. Since our car has a lot of geometry with the Subsurface Modifier, it can get kind of hard to see, but you can click this eye icon in that modifier in order to turn it off for a sec, just so you can see a little better. And since we have what you want to do is you don't want to just move one side at a time, because then it'll be uneven. Just select both sides at a time to move both of them, so then you get the same result on each side. And basically what I want to do is I just kind of want to tuck this into our mesh for the car. So I'm going to maybe add one more down just so that it tucks into the bumper for this. And I'll turn that back on. And now what we have is our headlights area. And what I want to do here is, before I create the round circles, that's redundant, I'm tired, I want to create like a little backsplash for it. If you take a look at a reference, there's these little plastic pieces that go around them. So I just want to model those in quick. And I'll do that in our car mesh. So I'm just going to select a couple of vertices around the very back. Oh, I'll turn this off for a sec. Maybe something like this. Shift D to duplicate them. And then I'm just going to use P to separate them into a different object. And this will be our headlights object. And then I'm just going to sort of fill these in with some faces. Doesn't have to be super neat, just because it does have to be neat enough where it. Oh, what happened? Oh, that's not what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna model the circles first, and then we'll fill in the blanks after. So what we're going to do for these headlights is I'm going to add in another object, Shift A, add mesh, and let's add the cylinders, or a cylinder. And before you move this around or anything, open up your toolbar, and if you look here towards the bottom, this comes up for a lot of different types of meshes that you add, and we can change a couple different options for them. We definitely don't need 32 vertices. I'm just going to select 12, and then click enter, and we'll just keep everything else the same. I'm going to go into edit mode and add in our mirror modifier actually, and then we have the same mirrored effect. I'm going to rotate it so it's lined up to like this, and just scale and move it into place where these headlights should be. Maybe I'll do this one first. Alright, let's get to modeling the headlight. I'm going to go to face select that top face, and click a cool, so we have the Extrude Tool, which if we extruded, that actually works fine. So let's just do that, but we also have an Inset Tool, which does something similar in this case, which is I. But I'm just going to extrude, scale it in, and I'm basically just going to freehand it based off this reference picture. Just giving it some depth here. Looks like goes down to create a little lens area around here. Then we're going to extrude, scale in. Lenses generally pop back out a little bit. Something like that. Now let's go ahead and add our Subsurface Modifier to smooth things out. And we don't really want it to be this round. So when we do add our Subsurface Modifier, the way we sharpen, it does round some things out, like we mentioned, but we don't want things to be super duper round all the time. So the way we can sharpen things up is by adding more loop cuts. So if I just add a loop cut around that, you can see that it starts to sharpen it up. And we'll just smooth shade it. We get something like that. And I'm just going to move it down a little bit to make it circle-y, so you can actually see the entire thing. And we get now we have a circle. And then I'm just going to duplicate this, Shift D, while in edit mode, just move it over here. Let me scale it down a little bit and bring it out. Bring this one out a little bit as well. Just sort of eyeballing it, because with these details, it's really hard to get everything exactly the way it should be. So basically, just you can eyeball it until you think it looks right. move that back a little bit. And this inner one actually isn't a headlight. So I'm going to delete a couple of vertices, those two inner loops. Turn this off for a sec so I can see. And this is more of a vent, so we wanted to have a hole in the center. So I'm going to extrude and once again, I'm just kind of freehanding it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe scale these all in a little bit. Something like that, maybe. I'll turn that back on. Sharpen it up a little bit. I don't really know what I'm doing, to be honest. Looks something like that. You can play around with it till you're happy with your shape. Is it like this? It's kind of hard to tell in this reference picture. Actually, I'm just gonna keep not put those, and we'll just keep it like that, with the air vent thing in the middle. That looks kind of weird. We might end up redoing that once I actually figure out the shape of it. You know what, let's just redo it now. I found a cool picture of it. I'm going to delete these vertices. Turn this off for a sec. So we have this outer shell. And it looks like we got... I'm going to Shift D to duplicate it, scale it in a little bit, bring it out, bring it in. I do want to make sure that's hidden, so I'm going to extrude it in, give it a little bit of a curve. This is dark because the normals are backwards, and to fix that we can just select it and click Control N, and that fixes your normals. Bring that in a little bit, extrude it in. Maybe something like that. I don't know. I apologize for the lack of commentary. I am very behind on sleep right now, but I do want to make this. Yeah, so let's just go ahead and add that backsplash little panel behind here. To do that, I'm just going to go into this headlight, our headlight mesh, add a plane, align it to view using these things, just move it behind these headlights. I do want to actually put it behind our headlights, not all the way back here. Probably goes somewhere there. yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. Actually, what I'm going to do is for this headlight backsplash thing. I know it's just technically supposed to go behind the lights, but I'm going to extrude it all the way across behind our grill. Actually, enable clipping. And what this will do is it'll give our grill a nice little backsplash. So it doesn't look like the car is hollow. Normally that's where the engine would be, but the engines are complex parts and not really seen that much, so obviously you don't. I mean, some people would model them, but we're not going to. We're just going to sort of fake it with that simple plane. And I think these headlights could probably use some readjusting a little bit, maybe. I'm not 100% sure if this is accurate positioning, but you can just play around with them yourself, see what you like. I mean, it is your model. Seems like they're kind of up here, and yeah, maybe something like that. And then this, no, we'll do that later. I'm gonna keep them centered for now. Yeah, to get it here, what I'm doing is clicking Shift Z, which enters our rendered mode. If you're using Blender internal, you may want to switch it over to cycles. It's a little bit quicker. That's what we'll be using to render our photo later. It's just a more accurate render engine. It looks more realistic. And if you have a graphics card, you can switch it over to that, and it will render quicker. Because rendering can be an intensive process. So right now everything's just sort of gray and dark stuff, but we can be adding materials to that later on if we would like to. Wow, how has it been half an hour already? I've just been kind of rambling on. Let's end this here. So we're going to be going through the entire car and just sort of doing stuff like this to make it look more realistic and adding in those details. Hopefully this wasn't like super duper not helpful, but yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next part.